one's more important than others. I think the whole concept of facilities management, but from my vantage point, the assistant to your position, I believe is critical. And we've talked about this many, many times, so I'm pleased to see you've made it a goal. It sounds like we have a roadmap to potential progress in that area, which I think is very, very positive for the community in the big picture. So, good for you. Okay. All right, so thank you for doing that and for recapping those goals that you have worked on over the last 12 months. That would bring us to a discussion of actually, from the Selectmen's point of view, the town manager's performance over the last 12 months, as we have agreed in our contract with Mr. Montori. We are to undertake that task each year at this time. So I want to call on my colleagues to offer whatever commentary you want to speak to, understanding full well that your comments become part of the minutes. The minutes, in effect, are the performance appraisal itself. And as has been our custom in the past, on the advice of town council, if you choose to or have prepared written commentary, I would ask at the conclusion of this discussion that we get those comments in writing to our recording secretary for inclusion in the minutes, to be made part of the minutes, so that we have a complete record of that discussion. So let me turn to my left and ask if Mr. Gay would like to lead us off.
Sure, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. There's a template that we've gone by the last couple of years of the evaluation form, but I'll just loosely bounce off of that and go back and forth. The first item that usually shows up in this form is managerial skills. And I think Richard does an exemplary job in this area, especially in written communication. Every week, town manager sends a communication to all the board of selectmen to go over all the issues that we have in front of us and to apprise us of everything that we've been working on and we're going to work on. And I think it's been very helpful. I enjoy reading it, and I know you put a lot of time and effort into it, and it certainly has made our lives easier, that we can all be on the same page when we finish reading it. So I thank you. That's really a very admirable quality that you have to communicate with your board and keep us all on the same page, keep us apprised. The organizational skills, I think, are top shelf. Since the time I've been on the board, and I've been on the board almost as long as Mr. Johnson, you've been a top quality manager since we hired you, and I think you have kept that level of expertise and has done such a great job as far as making everything in the town run smoothly, and certainly when things do come up that need to be addressed, you address them quickly, and you take care of them and apprise us all, and you do the best you can to make sure that things are done in a fair fashion, and we move forward. One area that I think you do an incredible job on the other things is budget presentation. And when you prepare the budget, you talk to each of us individually and let us know exactly what's going on and how you've interacted with the finance committee, and with a lot of this board has sat with the finance committee and watched the proceedings as they go forward, and you have made that very clear and easy for us to understand. In the past, before you were town manager, I was always a little bit fuzzy on a lot of things that were going on in the budget, just because I didn't quite understand exactly how everything worked, and you explained it very clearly and very methodically, so that I have a very firm understanding of where we're going, the amount of money we have to spend on different areas, especially things that are very needed, like the fire engine that we just bought a while ago, and things that are on the docket that we need immediately to keep everything going. The area that is on this sheet is about direction and supervision of departments. You had just talked about updating town policies, which is something that hasn't been done spotty for the last number of years. I compliment you on addressing that area. Sometimes a little bit of confusion about certain areas as far as policy goes. And supervision and personnel management, we do a great job of that. As I said, every so often wrinkles come up that need to be addressed, and you address them quickly and fairly and resolve them so they don't linger and they don't fester and turn into a larger problem. Organizational relations, it says on the sheet. Again, the preparation for our meetings here, the agenda is always very clear. You work well with the chairman. I was chair for 1 year, and I worked with you very closely. There's very little that falls between the cracks. Things that need to be addressed are always brought forward and discussed. The board is very clear about what we're going to talk about between meetings and when we do meet, and it shows when we sit in front of our viewing audience that we're all on the same page and we're all knowledgeable of what we're doing. There's very little confusion here about what our role is and what the agenda is and how we're going to address it. Community relations, you are very accessible, not just to us, but to the public in general. When people call for various reasons or they send emails about concerns or complaints, I know on a number of occasions I've sent you things that I bounce them to you after I get them, after I read them, and shake my head, and you address them and do the best you can to take care of them, and some of them aren't very easy. And you follow up and work with the people to try to resolve them best you can and let us know how it turned out and what the resolve was, which is not an easy thing to do because people obviously have certain feelings of concern that come up that they feel very strongly about, and they don't want them to, again, linger and hang around. And as far as personal qualities go, I've seen nothing but high integrity from you, and again, accessibility and the ability to connect with each of the board members and carve out enough time for us to talk about our issues or our personal concerns with you. And I always feel that you have an open door policy, not just with this board, but with other department heads and other members of the community. But for us, it makes a huge difference that we can come and sit with you for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever it takes to talk about things that we believe that should be moved forward, or things that you should focus your attention on. So in the past number of years that I've worked in this board, I have nothing but high praise for the job you've done, and I'm very much in favor of you being town manager as long as you want to be town manager. So I've enjoyed working with you personally.
Thank you.
That's my commentary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Day. Mr. Wentworth, if you're okay?
Sure,
Go
absolutely.
next, please.
There's could be some themes that are going to be repetitive, and I'm assuming we're using some of the same guidance around forms, that that's going to be the case, but certainly with the managerial skills and the communication, I second Selectman Gay's commentary around the weekly reports. I think they're extremely thorough. We get them at the same time every week, so we know to expect them. We're able to review, get as much detail as we want, but then have the opportunity to follow up with you during the week on things where we need a little more information. You're accessible for us. But I think what's also important is you know what information that the selectmen need to have, but you're also judicious in saying that the selectmen don't need every piece of information. And I appreciate that from a leadership perspective and from an executive perspective, really understanding what information is necessary for us in our role as selectmen, but also what information is not as necessary in terms of all the minute details. And if we want more, we can get it. But in these weekly reports and even in other communication, it's not laborious around all the minute details around a specific area unless we actually want it. And I think that's not just managerial skills, I think that's a leadership skill. I think your conservative and proactive approach to the budgeting process has enabled department heads to have significant input into their own priorities and say in the budgeting process, but as well as affording the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee to have the appropriate time to review, ask questions, and provide input on the budget. And I know before my time here as a selectman, the budgeting process wasn't as started as early as it is now. So to have that foresight in that thought and including the department heads to the scope that you do, I think is a very positive approach to this process. And the proof is in the pudding. The process has led to yearly deposits in the stabilization fund, the OPEB trust fund, while still addressing the core key capital needs on a yearly basis, but it's also enabled the Board of Selectmen to lower the tax rate on residents for the first time in 5 years, and as you mentioned in your goals, earn the town a AA+ bond rating. So the proof is in the pudding, and that approach is working, and the conservative and proactive approach is working. I know, like any large organizations that has a diverse workforce with many different job functions, there are employment issues with people, and you've always kept the Board of Selectmen in the loop on these issues, and in my opinion have addressed them in a fair and equitable way that is not only best for the individuals involved, but in the best interest of the town as well. And that's extremely important in terms of the approach to personnel issues and supervision of departments and employees. I think from a direction and project management perspective, certainly the fact that you are managing the completion of a new high school, the complete basically renovation of this town hall, starting the water treatment plant. I mean, there's no dearth of projects and capital projects going on in this town, and your ability to manage all of those at the same time, I think, is a critical skill that this town really benefits from. I know there are many times throughout the year the residents have an issue that need to be dealt with. At times, residents come to us, and we at times come to you with an issue. I know that at times residents come to you directly with the issue. And I think in both cases, you've been extremely responsive to the residents, at least the ones that I've talked to, and have either addressed the issue or respectfully explained to them why the situation is the way it is. And I had the ability to be on the town manager selection committee at the very beginning. And one of the things that I know was important to me and residents that I talked to was having the ability to have access to the town manager, for you to do open forums where you would bring people in and get input from the residents around a particular area or just the sort of the state of the town. And I appreciate the fact that you haven't lost sight of that. And over the years, you've run many open forums. Sometimes they're sparsely attended, I would say most times, but other times we have a pretty good crowd there. And people are able to be heard, and in some cases, issues addressed. So I appreciate the fact that you continue to run these open forums and town forums, especially when there's an issue that pertains to a certain location in town or certain residents and abutters. You run an open forum and get feedback from that group, and in some cases have made the decision to move a project from one area to another based on that feedback. So I appreciate the fact that you don't have an idea and say this is what we're going to do and we're just going to go and sell it. You're open to the feedback and then changing your approach to that based on the feedback from the residents. I think that's really critical for our town. There have also been many occasions where I've discussed certain ideas with the town manager, and some that he has agreed to, and others where he explained to me why we couldn't or shouldn't do it. Either way, you've been very respectful and professional in your dealings with me, even though I still believe that some of those ideas are still very good and should be implemented. Finally, I just want to say the residents and employees of the town of Tewksbury are very fortunate to have you as our town manager. The financial stability speaks for itself, but so do the many improvements of this town despite extremely tight resources over the last few years, and I certainly look forward to your continued leadership of this town. Thank you.
Excellent. Great job. Thank you, Mr. Wentworth. I'll turn to you, Mr. Panelitis.
I wrote something, so I'll submit that to the board secretary.
Oh, yeah.
But I'll just hit some of the highlights or lowlights, depending on how you look at them. So a lot of these are topics that have already been covered. Obviously, the management of the renovation of this building, under budget on time, things that we always like to say about public projects. The weekly reports that were mentioned, these are, I think, give us everything we need to do our jobs as selectmen. Regarding the budget, I think part of the process in this I've seen being at some of these budget the department head meetings, is that there's very clear expectations and there are realistic goals. So it's not a process by which people department heads come in asking for the world, knowing that they won't, they'll have to settle for something. There's actually a reasonable exchange of what's possible and what we need in setting priorities, and I think that adds to sort of the consistency of improvement over time, and that's, I think, an underrated quality. Again, the bond rating increase, I think, to the highest level it's ever been for the town. That should never go without mention. Again, with the department heads, I think there's an excellent balance between allowing the individual department heads to have some leadership and really run their departments, but at the same time, a consistent ethic of integrity and oversight over their activities, so that there's a balance there that I think is important. Talking about issues related to community relations, I think the interactions with individuals and groups in the town, everything, I've never heard a complaint as about the process related to that. I think you're very responsive to those that contact your office. In fact, it would be the one critique I have is that they're getting directly to you sometimes, when perhaps if there was somebody else within your office, like an assistant town manager, or even somebody else that can handle some of these issues without taking your time, just as we talked about earlier, not having department heads handling things that could be handled by somebody else. A matter of efficiency, not that those issues aren't important, but if somebody else can handle it, I think that's a way to improve how we do business. And so again, the assistant town manager position, I think, is an important first step in that. And then I just end by saying, recently, last year or so, with my activities on the EDC, I spent a lot of time with members of other communities, state delegation, and people in the administration. And I think it's safe to say that the general comment from anybody who has worked with our town manager in any other situation considers that we're a very lucky community to have him, and that again shouldn't go without being said. I think and that's not just the position of somebody on this board that works with our town manager on a daily basis. This is a recognized fact within the municipal professionals that we deal with, and so I think that's important as well. And that's all.
Thank you. Thank you. Would you pass those to County Secretary? So I'll note again, Mr. Kratman was present earlier for our executive session and is not at this time. So unfortunately, he can't participate in this discussion. I want to, before I offer my comments, I'm going through this process in my private employment, and I have a number of people who report directly to me in that capacity. And I just want to note, that in that context, these discussions typically are one-on-one conversations. In there, the spirit of the discussion is essentially the same, but it's certainly a less formal setting. And I imagine that this can be somewhat of an uncomfortable process. It's a hazard, if you will, of public service on all sides, but I want to remind people that we have done this in a public context for the 6 years that Richard has been our town manager. To my knowledge and best recollection, that did not take place before we contracted and hired you. The open meeting laws changed. Some of the requirements require that this kind of discussion take place in an open forum, but I don't want to just gloss over that fact. This is an important discussion, but it also is something that's new to Tewksbury in your tenure, and I appreciate your participation in it. Many of my comments, I'm going to sort of ask for forgiveness, if you will, because they're somewhat repetitive, but I would argue that that's because I think the judgment is accurate. If 5 individuals, or in this case tonight 4 individuals, step back and actually think about the last year and the performance of a single individual, and independently of one another come up with similar adjectives and concepts in areas that we feel collectively that our town manager has performed well in, or needs to perhaps improve in those areas, I think that supports that there's consistency and truth in what's being stated, because we're not pulling it out of thin air. Each of us independently is experiencing the same results and same context. So while my comments are probably in many respects repetitive, I'm going to go through them anyways in some detail, because I think that's important to this process. And I believe, as has been stated before, if we have no other responsibility for the town of Tewksbury, and I know as selectmen we have many, the number one responsibility is to recruit and hire and maintain or retain a qualified, competent professional to serve the community day to day. So in that context, this contract discussion and performance and goal setting is central to that, and I take that very, very seriously. So I'll try to be as quick as I can here, but we all worked off the same topical headlines. So in the area of managerial skills, my comments are that I find Richard to be the consummate professional. He readily adapts to a fast-paced and ever-changing environment. He's consistent in his approach and decision-making, and is thorough in his research to various issues and concerns. He readily considers input from selectmen, department heads, and residents relative to matters of concern, but is also decisive when he needs to be. With respect to budget preparation and administration, my comments are that I feel the budget preparation process continues to improve each year and is highly predictable and transparent at this time. Richard is consistent in his timeline and approach, clear with his messages, and sets appropriate priorities, in my opinion. He's been responsive to unanticipated budget issues and stayed true to fiscal policies adopted by our board. The policies he was instrumental in developing also have served as benchmarks for town meeting and were recognized by the rating agency Standard & Poor's as a basis for their upward rating adjustment to AA+. With respect to direction and supervision of departments, my comment is that Richard meets regularly with all senior managers, and those meetings are effective communication tools as well as team-building opportunities. He does a good job of coordinating various parties on issues requiring cross-departmental involvement. Richard has been consistent in setting expectations, addressing performance-related issues and concerns with an ethical and professional approach. In short, everyone is treated fairly and the same. Richard's supervision of the internal group and external stakeholders on the town hall renovation culminated in a very positive outcome for our community. That's just one concrete example. From the perspective of organization relations,